63 years of independence, 63 years of promises, 63 years of patience. It's time for governance now. Governance now. Let's make it work.
What I was trying to tell you is the most important aspect of fresh investments in the sector in the country is the land appropriation issue. Since I don't have much time, I thought I would confine my remarks to that, especially in context of the fact that this is holding up all the major investments, POSCO and others. What is this thing called land acquisition? How did it originate? What are the historic and legal underpinnings of land acquisition? I'll briefly touch upon those things so that will provoke some thinking among you. I see many of you are very young also, so we can think about it. The reason I put up this quote is that there are crises going on in Niyamgiri Hills or Vedanta, there is crisis going on in POSCO, Tata, Orissa, etc. Why is this happening? Gramsci said, in another context, the old is dying and the new is yet to be born. In this interregnum, a variety of morbid symptoms appear. So all these firings, riots, etc., morbid symptoms, why are they happening? They're happening because the land appropriation paradigm in India is more than 100 years old. The LA Act, the Land Acquisition Act, was made in the closing years of the 19th century, and we are still using it to acquire people's property. It was made at a time when government would acquire land for what are called sovereign purposes, for putting up police stations, post offices, high courts, secretariats, and so on. And now it's being used to foster private sector development. So these are the questions which arise. Do you forcibly acquire people's land for economic development or not? How have other countries tried to address this problem? I will just briefly touch upon the experience of USA particularly, which has done a lot of work in this area. And there's a celebrated judgment of 2005, which I think will be quite relevant in the kind of issues which we are facing today. This entire land acquisition thing arose from the concept of what is called eminent domain. It's a common concept in English common law, which says that the land, the sovereign which exercises sovereign functions is the owner of all the land. He's got the right of eminent domain. There's a Latin term for it called dominium eminens. And it's an inherent attribute of sovereignty. If you are a sovereign over a country, you have the domain over the land. But it's been qualified by legal evolution with two riders. One is that the eminent domain, the dominium eminens, must be exercised only for a public purpose. And secondly, if you are forcibly taking away people's land, it must be done with just compensation. This chap called Grotius, who is the founder of Western jurisprudence, which we are following more or less now, has a very elegant way of putting it. The land must be acquired only for those ends which those who have founded civil society must be supposed to have intended that private ends should give way. We put it in common English, it means that people who made a constitution have appropriated a certain area to public purpose, and land must be acquired only for that purpose, not for putting up somebody's private factory and so on. Secondly, he has added a second rider to it, that the state is bound to make good the loss to those who lose their property. This is the second rider which Grotius brought in. The whole concept of eminent domain arises from this chap's thinking. I'll quickly go into what the Americans have done about it. And the US Constitution has something called the Fifth Amendment. That is I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. That is the most famous amendment to the US Constitution, where the rights of the citizen have been given predominance over the functions of the state. And one of the changes brought about by the Fifth Amendment of the US Constitution is what is called the takings clause. The very simple English, government can take land only if it's for a public use, and secondly, if there's a just compensation. And public use means that this is a very, very important distinction. Government can acquire land in the US in terms of court judgments only if it is in exercise of the enumerated powers of government. That is, what are the enumerated powers of the government? The policing function, the post office function, the railways function, the highways function, the road transport function, not the POSCO function. That's what I was trying to say.